Start our session. Uh, Very good afternoon to everyone. I am Santosh Kumar Ranjan from Jawaharlal Nehru University, India, and I welcome all of you to today session 5V, which titled South Korea's Growing Soft Power. And we will have today four presenters from India. So they are going to discuss about the South Korea's growing soft power. And as we know that this is the Corona time, and after this Corona crisis, the world is looking towards the Indian market. So this session will be helpful for the Koreans and like the audience from Myanmar and from Cambodia to get overview and understanding about the India-Korea relation in terms of soft power diplomacy. So first, I would like to invite uh, Professor Kausal Kumar from Jawaharlal Nehru University to present his paper. And before that, I would like to mention that all presenters have 20 minutes to present their paper. So please welcome Kausal Kumar to present his paper. Please, Kausal sir, over to you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Professor Santosh. And I'm thankful to all of you, and especially this seminar organizing committee, to giving me this opportunity to present my paper in this webinar. And my topic is about the Korea's soft power diplomacy in Asia. That's how this South Korea and is successful in playing vital roles by using its soft power and connecting through the Asian countries, where it is paying high dividend to the Korean government. Okay, so as you might be knowing, but because my paper is about the soft power, so I'd like to give a brief sketch about the soft power, orig, orig, from whence it's originated and how the history of this the soft power. The soft power was coined by Professor Joseph Naas in the late 1980s. So it was he who coined these terms, and after that this becomes the very most popular in this diplomacy and academia as well, how the one country is connecting to the another country by using the means of the soft power. He described it as like this: with the ability of a country to persuade to others to do what it wants without any force or coercions. So that it was the direct counters of attacks, challenge to this what before this other country who was to get in tussle and win over the power over the military, or known as the hard power. So it was the another way of approaching and coercing the other country by by use and by means of the soft power. So there's a persuasive power, ability to the shape preferences, attraction, admiration, and reputations becomes the important and vital factors in this in this soft power diplomacy. The soft power is also defined as, that's the popular definition as given like this: the ability to get desired outcomes because the others want what you want. It is the ability to achieve the goals through the attractions rather than coercions. So that means whatever the cultural capitals, the culture you have, that culture in some other country, the other country peoples, they they start liking. By that means, one country can uh, establish their the diplomatic and cultural ties, and then through the means of the soft power. So that means whatever the power, this things one country has is liked by the other country, by that diplomacies one can achieve these ones. It is also described as like that way the most efficient means of the power, as it does not require the use of force or huge financial payoff to achieve or sustains one's policy objectives. That is the popular definitions. It works like that way. And then the Joseph Nair, the soft power, in his book, the soft power, the means to success in the world politics, has divided in the three categories. that is about the culture, values, and foreign policies. So, on basis of that, we'll deal. I'll put my view over here. So, this is the Professor Joseph Nair, and this is his book, The Soft Power. He has written this book in 2004. Okay, so this how this the component of the soft power um, is given like that way is the business innovations, the cultures, government, diplomacy, and education. These are the five components one country look while dealing with the soft power to the another country. So this is my main focus is of the today's my discussions about how Korean soft power, the Korean embassies, Korean country through its embassy and consulates by using to connect to the other country, especially the Asian countries, and how they are dealing with this in business innovations, the culture, government, diplomacy, and educations. So how these things they are dealing with like that way. Okay, so the soft power. So when while seeing like that was searching for about the soft power, there's another there's the Portland's kind of one organization is there. Since 2015, they have started working on the soft power 30, from where they come out of like the countries of the 30 most powerful nations on the basis of the soft power on the criteria of the digital, cultural, enterprises, engagement, educations, and this government. So they manage on these various scales and parameters. They do a study, and on the basis of that they do ranking. Not only these organizations, there are others world forums and there's others independent organization as well, which do this kind of the ranking as well. So that because this has become the one of the important aspect of the diplomacy, so it has getting popularity as it was popular, but its popularity has more giving this support from the academia as well. So that means there's so many researches as going on, and which country is doing what, how to achieve these goals or like that way. So while seeing like that with the soft power ranking, so this is two from the same side. Soft power 30 I've taken this one. So in 2015 to 2019, because they started in 2015 one day. So in 2015, we'll see the South Korea. It is the 20th rank. This is not about the five component I've just explained about. This is about overall. So, but in some components, South Korea is doing better. In some components, it's not that good. And then in 2019, it has achieved one ladder. It is one success like that way. It has come to the 19th. Maybe this because of this aggressive approach of this Korean embassy and consulate, while using this the soft power, the K-pop, especially this Korean movies nowadays getting popularity with that. So it is paying a good dividend to this to the diplomacy. Okay, so how with this why I've chosen this topics when that was this Korean soft power diplomacy when I heard about like this way the Donald Trump openly being as a president of this one of the great nations, so-called great nations, has criticized like that ways Oscars committee, Oscars members to give the award to the Parasite movie. It shows how is important it has becomes like that way the Korea's soft power has gained so much popularity is the even the most powerful nation's president is afraid of that. He's not able to tolerate that's this emerging power of like that way. So he may not be able to, but how it shows the popularity among the common people, how the common peoples they are interested in is about that. If the powerful person is afraid, so the other people's how this popular it may becomes in some common people like that. So that shows the coupleness. This shows the richness of the Korean soft power. With that's dealing with that's the soft power, how this Korea has not achieved this success where this the president is criticizing. It has gone through a journey, and that journey I will be dividing the four major turning points of that journeys from where this South Korean soft power has achieved this level. The first it started in like this way you can say the 1992 when the Culture and Tourism Institute was created by the Korean government of that time. And then at that point of time they started looking for the market to export this Korean component, especially the dramas, to outside this world. So what they did is what is love, what is the so the Korean drama was there, and that the first time they translated this one into Cantonese language, and this aired it to the Hong Kong, and after Hong Kong this Japan, Taiwan, mainland China's, and others part of the countries, it went like that way. So it was the first time, it was the in the Hong Kong, this experiment was so successful that it catch the other part as well. So that's Taiwan and Vietnam, Japan, mainland China, and the rest, as you know, this becomes the history. So like that way, and that's it was developing like that way. So then when the Korean realizes this importance of the soft power, but suddenly South Korea has to go to the 1997 economic crisis. Economic crisis has paid as this, they force us to think, the South Koreans to think about there's the economic miracle, export oriented, like goods export oriented policy. So the changes like that with how the soft power, how the cultural components, they can export and they can earn money up like that, and by that the cultural component they can, it can be helpful for the business like that. So at that point of time, this the Ministry of Culture was formed, and that's this, to be very surprisingly, they said that that year the Ministry of Culture budget has increased to 600% in order to create this, to give this stimulus to this K-pop and Korean dramas, this industry, so that it can be, uh, it can work like that way. So that much of money they have given to that. And so the third turning point you can see like this in 2012, when this Gangnam Style, the songs suddenly becomes so much popular, that so far what the Korean government has done to popularize that's this the K-pop, K-dramas like that way, with that only one hit of this song has becomes has earned so much of name. That's the others was like this so far of the journey of the so far of the Korean government, which becomes lesser in this in the scale value than this one single song. So even the some people's like they say like that way, and it's like this song made the South Korea so much popular that even National Institute for International Education scholarship, that is NID, this is one of the best Korean government scholarships. Those scholars could not make South Korea that much popular in their respective countries. So that this only one song this made them so much powerful. That's this connection, name and fame to this Korea like that way. And just the fourth turning point was from that I started like that way. The Oscars award to the Parasite, and that's the USA president is feeling like it's not good about this. There's so much name and fame to this Korean movies. Okay, now it's coming up with the Korea soft power, and this English terminology, which is called as the soft power, but in the Korean terminology it's called as Hallyu. Hallyu. This popularly known as the Korean wave. This is the popular culture through the world. As I explained about, this started in this 1990s. So that was this Hallyu. This in the Korean terminology one can define, then one can say. And then of course the Chinese media has highlighted this popularity of the Korea started from the Hong Kong. That's but in China it's become so much popular that they started giving the importance this the Hallyu, and like that way. And even in Japan it was so much popular. In fact it has so much heat of like that when Japanese government has to stop airing this Korean drama, so that this Japanese people they can watch this the Japanese drama. So even that it has reached at that level of that much of popularity in Japan as well. And it is of course it is helping the Korea to focus on the cultural diplomacy through the Hallyu. That's we'll see in this later part. So with these like this, there are so many component of this. When I say I talked about the Hallyu, that is Korean drama, Korean movies, K-pop, and then this Korean beauty products as well. That is component or part of like that way. From where? That's as I explained like that way. It was from the Korean dramas, basically Korean drama and movies, but not basically the Korean dramas, which becomes a popular throughout the world and Asia as well, like Vietnam, And in India, it's not all across the India, but in the middle and the northeastern part of this. But now this younger generations, those who are so much fond of like this way, they are watching this Korean drama with with this Netflix coming as becoming a popular in India among the youths. So this has become the new trend like that way, because the the Korean contents are not as easily available as the Indian contents on the YouTubes. So there has the piracy piracy issues like that way. So not the people, they can't easily upload on the YouTube. So that is there. And the another part there, what this why these movies are so popular like that way. This romantics and love triangles movies, what the Korean, the movie and drama they shows, that appeals the Asian sentiment as well. So, and there's something, some newness is there, that what we Bollywood and others Asian movies also they make like that way. But why it is different? Because there it has some newness, and because of the newness it is liked by the others. And YouTube's and the free website has worked as a catalyst. Sorry, worked as a catalyst where this it is easily available, and is easily available and share like that way. And it's coming back like the K-pop. Now the latest trend is then the K-pop is like that way. Like that is the more except as Korean movie Parasite and some other few movies, renowned movies. It is the K-pop which is most popular among the youth rather than the movie critics like that way. And there are some of the popular K-pop bands in Korea is BTS, Super M's, Girls' Generation, EXO, Super Junior, Wonder Girls, and there's the many more was coming up like that way. The another part is like the K foods. The new entrant in this part is like that way. That is new about how the diplomacy of the Koreans trying to uh, ex- uh, try to export this culture through this Korean movies and drama. Because when you see this it's not intentionally, but it has been since the past. You see that when you start seeing the Korean movies and Korean drama, in a drama at least you find that 5 to 10% of scenes and dialogues are filmed in this through um, the heroines or protagonists are discussing in the while eating the Korean food or enjoying the Korean soju drinks. So that's in that indirect way of exporting this culture to the over there. And particularly in Asian scenarios like that way, the Korean government is trying their best to facilitate the K-pop groups to the Asian citizens in order to emphasize the brand value of the Korea. So that's this. If the peoples of the Asia, they will see their star in one to one together or in some programs like that way, that the connectivity and the richness will increase. So that is one of the reasons the Korean embassy is working hard to bring these K-pop groups in India and other countries. Even they have the busy schedules like that way, but they're trying so that the people can connect with them like that way. And other component like this Korean government is focusing in all five elements. That's the business, informations, culture, government, diplomacy, and education. That what I earlier explained like that ways to make it presence felt in this Asia as a whole. And they're also helping this common people to clearly distinguish between the culture from the Japanese and the Chinese. So that's the peoples of the Asia, they get confused about like that way among the Chinese product and Chinese people, and then this Japanese. But because of this help, this connection, this interaction between the people to peoples, the people may feel like this. So no, okay, it's not about it's not only the binary, either it's Japanese or Chinese. This is third part as well. It's Korean, and they can distinguish it clearly. So that is helping like that way. As Korean government is also supporting the business innovation by this companies like the Samsung, LG, Hyundai, like in Indian cases like this, where the world's largest factory has in Noida, as they've established, and their R&D that they are doing. So that's kind of is help is also going on. Okay, this cultural relations, of course, there's people to people interactions where there's, okay, sorry, there's a spelling mistakes of the tourism. So they can establish the tourism, and the for others they can move ahead. And another part is like this opening of like Korea Trade Investment Promotions Agency, the KOTRA, especially in the Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan and other countries as well, so that they can connect the peoples from these countries to Korea directly. So that's the labors they can provide the cheap labors from this country and can go and Korea can work like that way. So that is also part of this diplomacy. But thus another part is like this: India do not recognize Kotra officially because still India face this that we can't, the Indians can't send their the labor classes to Korea to work over there. So that's this ministry levels feeling is there, and I don't know exactly what is the reason behind like that way, but Indian government is not officially recognizing this one. On educational front, when we see like this, with the number of fellowship the Asian students are increasing each year. So it's not like that earlier it was they used to give to the USA and in Asian countries, China only, and some other European countries. When you see the number of this fellowships given to this Europe and then Asian countries has become almost similar. Even in some cases, it has increased. The number of the fellowship given to the Asian has increased, and these scholars and the scholarships are paying dividend to the in expansion of the soft power. Like this, we'll see this in some of the fellowship like that way. The Asian students for the in order to make them the future cultural ambassador, there are some fellowship like NID. They gives the master and PhD programs, and the short term NID short term programs. Even the POSCO I miss like that way. They give for like that way. Korea Foundation is there, and there's some university to university exchange programs. And how this KTO, this Korea Tourism Organizations, is trying to portray the Korea's image so far only known in this
Also, sir,
English.
sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you. Please,
yeah,
please wrap up in within one
yeah,
to
yeah,
two
sure, sure.
minutes.
I'm about to finish. So it's in this local languages and they're using so that the peoples can know about the Korea and this will not confuse about Japan and China. So this brings to with my conclusions. The Korea soft power, starting from K-pop movies and K-drama, it has reached to the K-pop and the K fashions and the beauty products, and now this is coming to the K foods. The Korean government, through its embassy and consulates, are trying hard to utilize the name and fame created by the K-pop teams and Korean movies throughout the world. These soft power are mutually helping each other to create the strong brand value of Korea. It is trying to establish itself as a Hollywood of the East Asia. By increasing its soft power, it can greatly boost its economic and empower the diplomatic ties between the Asian countries. With that, I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kausal, sir, for the nice presentation. You have covered the soft power definitions, and basically you covered the South Korea's cultural soft power and in relation with the Korea. And due to lack of the time, I will look forward the second presenter. So there is a little bit changes. So next presenter is Deepak Ranjan. He is going to talk about the India's contribution in the peace process on Korean Peninsula. So Deepak Ranjan,
Yes, he's there.
I look forward.
Mike,
Deepak
his
Ranjan,
mic
okay.
mic is
So over to you, Deepak Ranjan. Thank you, Kausal sir.
Yes, good afternoon all. I'm Deepak Ranjan. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my paper. I shall be presenting my paper on the India's contribution in the peace process of Korean Peninsula. This year it completes 20 years of Korean War, and even after 20 years later, forgotten conflicts are still fresh for veterans. Tensions remains among nations, even fighting a war between 1950 to 53, which also saw the intervention of major powers, witnessed a complete separation of two societies, with people-to-people contact and communication virtually severed. Inter-Korea relations have remained plagued by four crucial issues: precarious inter-Korean security relations, weapon of mass destruction, uh, economic opening and reform in the north, and the challenges of domestic successes building in the south. I shall be briefly describing the history of South Korea and North Korea relations. So during the later dictatorship of the Park Chung-hee administration in the south and communist dictatorship of the Kim Il-sung regime in the north, The two Koreans signed North-South Joint Statement, in which Seoul and Pyongyang agreed on the three principles of non-interference, peace, and national unity. These principles were to be on the basis for future reunification process and management of inter-Korean relations, with the goal to enhance mutual understanding and reduce tension and mistrust between the parties. During Chun Do-hwan administration, nonetheless during the Park Chung-hee and subsequent Chung Do-hwan eras, relations were largely marked by distrust and incidents of conflicts, including acts of terrorism by North Korea, in particular the Rangoon bombing incident of October 1983. In August 1985, the South Korea Red Cross agreed to visit the two Koreas' separated families, hometowns, and exchange inter-Korean art groups. And on September 20, 151 people each visited Seoul and Pyongyang, showing a chance in North Korea's view. So in the Kim Dae-jung administration, a more significant breakthrough in the relations was made in 1988 after the inauguration of the progressive Kim Dae-jung government and its initiation of an engagement policy towards the North, dubbed the Sunshine Policy. In 2000, President Kim Dae-jung visited North Korea for the first time in June and met Kim Jong-il. The first ever inter-Korean summit between President Kim Dae-jung and North Korean leader Kim Jong-il took place in the June 2000 with a view to promote mutual understanding and realize reconciliation and peaceful unification, as evidenced by the signing of the June 15th South-North Joint Declaration. In the Roh Moo-hyun administration, relations did show improvement during these years and included the second ever inter-Korean summit in October 2007. North Korea still carried out provocations. In the Lee Myung-bak administration, if you see, the decade of engagement policy and conciliatory experience was reversed in 2008. Tensions rose after shooting death of South Korean tourists at Mount Kumgang Resort. Results tools were suspended. The reforms were made in Vision 3000, denuclearization openness policy, and make as mutual benefits and common prosperity policy, which were not predicted on North Korea's denuclearization and reform. During his term in office, with the expansion of the Kaesong industrial complex, inter-Korean exchange and cooperation, including civilian, were virtually suspended. For the most part, the Lee era of inter-Korean relations was characterized by the heightened military tensions, no high-level meetings, and severe reductions in the confidence-building exchanges and cooperation, including tourists visiting the North and reunion of separated family. During the Park Geun-hye era administration, relations continued downhill despite her so-called trust-building process. The advent of this administration witnessed the introduction of a principled policy of the mutual trust building on the Korean Peninsula. It also envisioned humanitarian assistance and placed greater people-to-people exchanges. It was believed trust could be built to normalize inter-Korea relations and create enduring peace on the peninsula. Despite North Korea's sending of high-level delegation to South Korea to attend the October 2014 closing ceremony of the Asian Games held in Incheon, the era was marked by continual robust military provocations by the North, including exchanges of artillery fire, numerous tests of ballistic missiles of various range and type, 3 nuclear tests were done, and suspensions was done by the North, and then sustaining by the South of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, which was the last remaining vestige of the inter-Korean economic cooperation of the Sansan policy. In the Moon Jae-in administration, a peaceful and prosperous Korean peninsula is the most important goal for the South Korea to pursue in its international relation, was said. In this regard, South Korea seeks to foster inter-Korean reconciliation and cooperation as well as denuclearization of the peninsula. The associated policy tasks are Korea-focused to realize the new economic map for the Korean Peninsula and new economic unification, sign an inter-Korean basic agreement and redefine the inter-Korean relations, resolve humanitarian issues including human rights in North Korea and the separation of family members in the two Koreas, improve inter-Korea's relations through reinvigorated exchanges, create a public consensus on unification and conclude a national pact on unification, and resolve the North Korean nuclear issues peacefully and build a peace regime. North Korea did conduct a 6th nuclear test in September 2017, but that has been the final one to date. acceptance to send delegations to Seoul and Pyeongchang to prepare for and to participate in the 2018 Winter Olympics being hosted in South Korea. The positive momentum was catalyzed into the third ever Inter-Korea Summit at Panmunjom in late April and produced a significant declaration, the Panmunjom Declaration, in which Koreas agreed to various measures to reconnect the blood relations of the people and bring forward the future of co-prosperity, make joint efforts to alleviate the acute military tensions and practically eliminate the danger of war on the Korean Peninsula, and actively cooperate to establish a permanent and solid peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. The event saw the first ever visit of Korean leader to South Korean territory and included various high-ranking officials from both sides and symbolic gesture, that is trees planting ceremony during his administration. Now I shall be focusing on the India's relation with South Korea. In 1961, the two countries agreed to establish consular relations, reflecting India's principled policy of equivalence towards the two Koreas, and continued to advocate for peaceful reunification by direct inter-Korean negotiations without outside interference. However, efforts and contact picked up in the 1970s. Full diplomatic relations were realized in 1973, and from the mid-1970s, India and South Korea shared bilateral agreements in trade promotion and economic and technical cooperation, culture, and science and technology cooperation. By the early 90s, India began to cite its absolute equivalence policy toward the Korea, and India-Korea economic relations began to grow, with two-way trade rising to US $700 million by 1983, and India started taking note of South Korea's export-led economic growth. In the 2000 and 2010, the relationship between India and Republic of Korea began moving beyond the economic and strategic partnership, with naval cooperation, cyber security, and joint research and development and design of defense systems are areas being explored for cooperation. The Look East policy was launched, through which New Delhi sought to deepen relationship with countries outside its region, that is South Asia, with a broader perspective at making inroads in East Asia, including on the Korean Peninsula, and especially South Korea, as the advent of the real democracy brought the Republic of Korea ideologically closer to the Indian ethos. High-level contacts were fostered with increasing number of leaders, summits, and regularized consultations at different levels, nurturing the partnership through high-level political exchanges, parliamentary exchange visits, deepening economic ties, including business investments, new science and technology links, and strengthening cultural ties by boosting people-to-people relation and travel through various institutional arrangements at the governmental and non-governmental levels. Trade ties between the two countries are booming as they aim for bilateral trade of $50 billion by 2030. I shall be focused on North Korea and India relation. New Delhi signed its first cultural agreement with North Korea in 1976 with an Indo-Korean Friendship Association visiting Pyongyang in September 1979. With the DPRK, India's relations warmed somewhat early in the decade, with high-level visits taking place in 1980 and again in 1987, focusing on exploring ways to expand economic cooperation. In the mid-1980s, North Korea also had its first integrated circuit factory built in Pyongyang via UN support, with the plant construction done by a company with strong ties to the Indian government. The UN initiated Center for Space Science and Technology Education in Asia and the Pacific in Dehradun has trained at least 30 Korean students since 1996. Graduates of these institutes have gone on to occupy many prominent positions in Pyongyang and include the North Korean embassy's first secretary to India, Hong Yong-il. In 2015, the then Indian Prime Minister of State for Home Affairs, Kiren Rijiju, at the North Korean Independence Day celebration in New Delhi, expressed interest in improving bilateral trade and commerce ties. Outside of China, India is already North Korea's second largest trading partner, and the latter has regularly received humanitarian assistance from India under the UN World Food Programme. Reciprocally, when a tsunami struck India in 2004, North Korea donated $30,000 to India as a goodwill gesture. More recently, in 2018, Indian Minister of State for External Affairs, V.K. Singh, visited North Korea to discuss political, regional, economic, educational, and cultural cooperation between the two countries. So, why India need peace? on Korean Peninsula. There are several reasons. A stable, peaceful Northeast Asia is needed for regional actors and peripheral stakeholders like India to build economic relations and trade, and for each country's economic growth. The goal of economic development for India in East Asia will be hindered without peaceful Korea. The nuclearization or denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is of significant importance to India. Look, I will focus on the contribution of India and to Korea. India already played an important role during the Korean War, provide humanitarian and medical assistance. The 60th Parafield Ambulance, a medical unit of the Indian Army, consisting of 346 personnel, looked after 2 lakh wounded soldiers and carried out 2,300 field surgeries in its 3.5 years of services. In 1952, it was an Indian resolution on Korea that was adopted at the UN with unanimous non-Soviet support that ended the fighting. Later in 1953, led by Major General SSP Tharot, India also sent 6,000 soldiers as part of custodial force to oversee the repartition of about 20,000 prisoners of war. Additionally, V.K. Krishnan Menon's proposal to form a neutral nations repatriation committee was also accepted, and General K.S. Thimaiya served as its chairman. Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, along with his aides such as B.N. Rao, India's permanent representative to the United Nations, K.M. Panikkar, India's ambassador to China, and a special envoy V.K. Krishnan Menon led a campaign to stop the conflict from the earliest possible date. The fact that Chinese President Zhou Enlai preferred to communicate with the Americans through Indian officials highlights the role India was playing to bring peace to the war-torn country. At that point, India was the only country both parties could trust. India also played an important role in the Neutral Nations Repartition Commissions, which set up to decide the fate of more than 20,000 prisoners of war from both sides, that India was chosen to chair the NNRC, that is Neutral Nations Repartition Commission. Lieutenant General K.S. Thimaiya, the Indian head of NNRC, was celebrated at home and abroad for having executed his mission successfully and courageously. P.N. Huxer, aide to the NNRC, played a leading role in drafting the proposals related to repartition to the UN General Assembly in 1953 and 1954. At the end of the negotiation, when 8 or so prisoners of war refused to go back to their native countries and wished to go to neutral countries, India immediately welcomed them to Delhi, pending of a final decision by the UN on their fate. When most of them chose to leave for countries in Central and South America, India let them go as per their free will without any restriction and conditions. One prisoner, Kim Hyong, who expressed his desire to live and raise his family in India, was allowed to do so without any problem. To commemorate India's peacemaker role, Korean War Memorial is now being built in New Delhi. So now I will conclude my presentation. Despite such great efforts, India's peace-building role during the Korean War has been mostly ignored by the general public, scholars, and government officials, both in Korea and abroad. Most have mentioned India's role in passing only. British historian Robert Barnes is the first scholar who in his 2013 study between the blocs, India, the United Nations, and ending the Korean War, rightfully analyzed India's role during the Korean War and acknowledged its never-ending and sincere efforts in peace building in Korea. The Indian government has declared full support for President Moon's peace overtures to North Korea and is offering to play a mediator role if its services are requested. It is prepared to go the extra mile to complete the unfinished task of ending the Korean War and peacefully unifying the Korean Peninsula. Now, India's participation as a mediator could facilitate the flow of information and increase the efficacy of bilateral communication, encourage symmetry dialogue and confidence-building measures, and provide a neutral third party who could carry out monitoring functions in case of an agreement. Building peace on the Korean Peninsula is becoming more imperative not only for India but for every country in the region. It is time we start making collective efforts in that direction. Thank you.
For very broad presentation on the India's role of Korean Peninsula. Basically, Deepak Ranjan covered the inter-Korea relations and then India's relation with Korean Peninsula, and most importantly, India's role to make a peace process in Korean Peninsula. So after that, I would like to invite the third presenter, Mr. Vikas Kumar. Vikas, sir, are you there? So he is going to present India's soft power diplomacy for South Korea under the Modi government, the current regime. So over to Vikas Kumar.
My topic is India's soft power diplomacy for South Korea under Modi government. In this paper, I will cover India's soft power mechanism for bilateral relations with South Korea. I have divided four parts in this paper. First is introduction. So, soft power describes the ability to influence the actions of others by virtue of one's culture, values, and policies. Soft power refers to the ability to persuade others to do everything using neither force nor coercion. It works through attraction and cooperation rather than coercion and payoff. According to Joseph Nye, soft power is co-operative power as opposed to hard power. Historically, the roots of Indian soft power can be traced back to the philosophical concept of ahimsa of Emperor Ashoka. From classical dance, music, old tradition of yoga, Ayurveda, fashion, Bollywood movies, Indian culture is a power of attraction. Soft power is mostly based on intangibles such as the power of example, yoga, Buddhism, movie, music. Soft power enables a change of behaviors in others without competition or conflict by using persuasions. It has the capacity to influence broader international audiences at large in shaping the perceptions about the environment of the permissive boundary in which economic and military power is used. A country's soft power influence rests on how effectively it uses resources of culture, values, and economic. Soft power is uh, power, and at times it is more powerful than hard power. Soft power is the ability to shape the preference of others through appeal and attraction. The three pillars of soft power are political values, culture, and foreign policy. Soft power can be a potent tool for bringing harmonious relations and peace between two nations. This paper examines the Narendra Modi administration's use of three specific soft power of India, Buddhism, diplomacy in service of the country's national interest. Uh, Next is the foreign policy under Modi government since uh, 2014. During his first 2 years in office, he traveled to more than 3 dozen countries, some more than once, a state visit or to attend a regional or global summit. Modi has upgraded India's relations with countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, France, Germany, Canada, South Korea, and Israel, among others, creating new trade and commercial opportunities. Foreign policy became one of the many tools to be utilized by his institution service of India's economic growth and development. During his foreign visit, Modi has frequently promoted India's soft power. The Indian government administration concerted effort to project India's soft power in the service of large strategic goals. Modi government appears to believe that although India's soft power may not be able to directly persuade actors to support India's position on various issues, in the long run, it will make it easier for India to traditional foreign policy goal related to security and economic interest. Next is in the India soft power diplomacy. According to Joseph Nye, the person who coined the term soft power is the ability to influence others to go on once through attraction rather than coercion or payment. If a country has substantial soft power, its actions will be seen as more legitimate and it will be likely to receive from others. This form of power is becoming increasingly important in the post-Cold War era. It is traditional understanding power related to coercion, which focuses on a state's military power strength. The three sources of state soft power are its culture, its political values, and its foreign policy. The source of India's soft power that have been identified include Ayurveda, Bollywood, Buddhism, cinema, diaspora, fine arts, information technology, and yoga. There are multiple objectives behind the projection of software by India, including making of lack of mitigating international anxiety about India's rise, improve India's image, honoring the legacy of founding father Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru. Modi has projected aspects to India's power in the service of its foreign policy. The Prime Minister Modi has drawn attention to India's soft power resources and projected India as a winning rising power. Next is in this soft power, the Modi government had uses many soft power mechanisms such as Buddhism. Buddhism, he has emphasized Buddhist value like equality, non-violence, discussion, dialogue, and righteous conduct, Asian renewal, and the basis for productive relations between various Asian countries. Buddhism is considered as the common bond that tie Asian countries together, and Buddha's message of peace is just as relevant today as it was in the past. In 2014, the Modi administration formally established Nalanda University, the new university located near the site of Nalanda, the famous ancient Buddhist center of higher learning in eastern India. As part of its outreach to Buddhist Asia, India hosted the International Buddha Purnima Divas celebrating in 2015, which was a global celebration of the Buddha's life and teachings. Buddhism has certainly emerged as a prominent soft power asset for India under the Modi administration. It exists extensively in the service of India's foreign policy interests and goals, especially in the outreach to South and Southeast Asian countries. In order to boost people-to-people relations and travel between two countries, India extended visa on arrival for Korean tourists from 15 April 2014 as a gesture of friendship and goodwill to the Korean people. Prime Minister gifted a sapling of the sacred Bodhi tree under which Lord Buddha had attained enlightenment. Next mechanism is diaspora. Diaspora are sometimes considered to be one of the most prominent soft power assets of a country. The Indian diaspora connected to each other and to the mother country through digital technology. Each and the diaspora is truly global, having a presence in almost every region of the world. The diaspora includes Indian citizens temporarily residing abroad and people of ancestry and their descendants who are not citizens of India. More recent administrations in India have cultivated the diaspora in a sustained manner, using them to reach out to their adopted country for the purpose of transmitting information about developments in India and seeking investors and partners. The diaspora's economic power is undeniable, and the administration's desire to harness this to boost India's economic growth and development, beginning with their involvement in campaigns like Swachh Bharat, Clean River, and Making India. Next mechanism, yoga. Along with Buddhism, yoga is probably one of the most famous cultural exports of India. The globalization culture, rising stress level associated with modern life, and the desire to enhance strength, flexibility, and peace, the workplace and daily lives are part of the reason why yoga is becoming increasingly popular. Yoga is a Sanskrit word meaning union. The Modi use of yoga is a soft power asset is designed to achieve some of the same purpose that the promotion of Buddhism and the outreach to diaspora are expected to achieve. The promotion of yoga boosts India's international image, project it is a peaceful rising power, and use it as means to disseminate. Next is popular Indian food in South Korea. Food is also a mechanism for in India's soft power diplomacy to South Korea. Some popular food, Indian food, deep fried mandu and gujia, gamjarion, chana dal tikki, kimchi and achar. Next is a story of legendary Queen Suriratna. hundreds of South Koreans visit the birthplace of the Hindu god Rama for the sake of paying homage, homage to their legendary queen Shoham work, also known as Pijan Suriratna, who was first mentioned in 13th century Korean text known as Sambak Yusa as the wife of King Su of Gyeongwon Gaya, which was ruling city-state in Korea during the period of the Three Kingdoms. This Sambuk Yusa was compiled by a group of Buddhist monks as a collection of fables. In conclusion, under the modernization, the use of soft power, assets, and tools is becoming increasingly common in the foreign policy. This is in line with the Modi administration effort to integrate and project various aspects of India's the service of larger strategic goal. Prime Minister Modi's administration has focused on these three soft power assets primarily because they assist India in traditional diplomatic goals. Cultural diplomacy in the form of promotion of Buddhism and yoga and diaspora have been used to complement India's conventional diplomacy, boost its international image, project it as power, improve relations with other countries, and help attract foreign investment, technology, and tourists. The promotion of Buddhism and its identification will help India create a winning image of itself, build Asian country, attract tourists, and help it in search for commonality with China. Finally, the promotion of yoga is designed to introduce foreigners to India's ancient culture, encourage them to learn about other aspects of India's culture, address yoga's increasing commercialization and deviation. This includes the promotion of Buddhism, a common culture and civilization link to build a new relations Southeast Asian country in the post-Cold War era, in line with the objective India's Look East Act East policy. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Vikas, sir, for wonderful presentation. Basically, the India's soft power towards the Korea, and basically you covered from Buddhism to Indian diaspora, yoga, through the food, and especially the historical linkage between India and Korea, which always discuss in Korean and among the Indians related to one Indian princess who married the Korean king Sri Ratna, Korean king Kim Suru, and the Indian princess Sri Ratna Hwangok. And so now I will forward to our last presenter for this session is Ram Pravesh Shah. He is going to discuss about the India diaspora in South Korea, a soft power diplomacy. So Ram Pravesh Shah, sir, are you there?
My topic of presentation is Indian diaspora in South Korea, a soft power diplomacy. Actually, now coming to my presentation. Actually, I have divided my paper into two parts. The first is Indian diaspora in South Korea, and the second is soft power diplomacy and its theoretical understanding. Actually, I will speak about my second part first. Then I will come to the my first part, Indian diaspora in South Korea, because it is very necessary to speak about soft power. Then Indian diaspora, how to relate Indian diaspora with soft power actually. So the paper basically traces the evolution of India as a soft power since its emergence as an independent country. How India's current political leadership and in this paper, my second presentation in this my paper, how India's current political leadership different from earlier one as far as Indian diaspora is concerned. Basically, coming to the soft power. Put simply, soft power is soft. It does not rely on hard instrument of power like a military tank. The major difference between hard power and soft power is that the hard power asks actor to do something with coercion, where soft power persuades do the same without coercion. Professor Joseph Nye has given the concept of soft power in 1990s, who defines soft power as the ability to obtain preferred outcomes through attraction rather than coercion or payments. So soft power encompasses nearly everything other than economic sanctions and military power. Soft diplomacy, soft power diplomacy actually, so the major characteristic of soft power include culture, values, and policies. Theoretical understanding about soft power, a neo-realist in the Academy of International Relations, the neo-realist approaches tend to emphasize the hard power, while liberal institutionalists considered soft power as an essential assets of statecrafts. Now coming to the India's soft power, over the last decades, many scholars and analysts have tried to assess India's emergence as a power major actor in the global arena by looking at such as material indicators as economic growth, military expansion, demographic evaluation. As a consequences, they have overlooked New Delhi increased emphasis on its soft power. So Indian diplomats such as Shashi Tharoor has argued that if India is now perceived as a superpower, it was not just through trade and politics, but also through its ability to share its culture with the world through food, music, technology, Bollywood, etc. India has a long history of civilizational and cultural links with countries in Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and Middle East. For example, Buddhism spread from India to China and beyond, leading to a sustained exchange of ideas since ancient time. Even today, Nalanda Buddhist University is a clear example of India's exchange between China, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. Uh, so there is also the idea of Indian great leaders like Gandhi, Nehru, Tagore, Kautilya, etc. Their idea, have impacted worldwide. If we compare, Kautilya theory of realist in Indian perspective, which is considered to the equal to the to Machiavelli in Western philosophy. So Mahatma Gandhi has also, given a broader idea how to look at of world politics without giving any narrative of complexes. Gandhi has talked about non ahimsa. Nehru talks about pan Asianism, and the lastly, coming to the Indian diaspora. Actually, Indian diaspora in South Korea. Before going to my second part, Indian diaspora in South Korea, there are three main subtopic which need to be talked about. The first is current situation of Indian diaspora. The second is Modi government initiative, and the third is Indian presence in South Korea. Coming to the first part, current situation of Indian diaspora. According to a UN study, Indian diaspora become largest in the world, which comprises 6.4% of total migrants population in the world. In 1990s, India was just behind Russia and Afghanistan. Now India has become, largest in the world, actually, in terms of Indian diaspora. The second part, government, Indian government, Modi government has used of three specific soft power asset of India, that is Buddhism, diaspora, and Indian ego philosophy. Coming to the Indian philosophy, coming to the first part of my presentation, how India's soft power look at Indian diaspora as a one of the major ingredients of diaspora, actually. Of soft power. Diaspora, Indian diaspora actually. One second. Indian diaspora is any country, can resolve its relations with other through a process of melting its diaspora notion into foreign policy. Actually, India. Uh, so now coming to the my second part of presentation, which is India and South Korea relation, about signed numerous bilateral agreements with the aims of taking their ties to the next level. However, the economic partnership is stuck at 22 billion annually, and their defense partnership appeared to have receded from great all-round promise to mere mere sale and purchase of weapon system. Despite the despite the best effort, India and South Korea are failing to touch a mutually meaningful code of empathy and move closer to each other. Because if you if we look at the India's and South Korea relation, there is a long history of its relation, cultural relation, I mean religious relation. So in this process, Indian diaspora is in South Korea and vice versa can fill the gap between the two countries actually. So these are my presentation and concluding remark also. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ram Pravesh sir, for keeping time and your wonderful presentation on this topic. You have covered the India's diasporas and India's soft power diplomacy in Asia as well. So now we listen all four presenters. So we have a two discussion. One is Bhupinder Kumar and another one is Amardeep Kumar. So first we will listen from the discussion. After that, if time's allowed, then we will open floor for the question and discussion from the presenters. So first we will have Bhupinder Kumar, who will give discussion on the presentations. So Bhupinder Kumar. Is he co-host there? Can we check?
Thank you.
Bhupinder Kumar, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Over to you, Bhupinder Kumar.
Yeah. Yeah, we really have had excellent presentations. Four excellent presentations regarding the covering Korea's soft power and its impact on world politics, and also we have looking into various components of soft power through the various presenters. So here, first of all, I would like to say that I will be discussing two of presenters. That is, firstly, the Korea's soft power diplomacy in Asia by Kaushal Kumar, and then secondly, I will talk about India's soft power diplomacy for South Korea under Modi government by Vikas Kumar. And rest of two presentations will be covered by my colleague Amardeep Kumar. So here we comes into the focus upon the Korea's growing soft power, because as presenters have highlighted the various notions about complexities about soft power and its importance in international politics. So then Korea's Korea's how does Korea's soft power influence different different international politics, and how does it promote the South Korea interest? So here we know that as it is defined soft power. When we talk about soft power, the very first notion that appear, that power, about power, what is power? Power is like ability to affect other to obtain the outcome you want. So here is outcome is not in terms of hard military terms, but through soft power and gaining their interest. So through the Korea soft power diplomacy, Professor Kaushal Kumar has identified South Korea's complex engagement with outside world and its influencing outside world, and he aptly highlighted the major turning point in South Korea's foreign policy starting onward from 1992 to 2020. So then in global world in arena, we mostly when we look upon the culture and politics, we mostly talk in terms of European or American politics and all these things, but we misses a lot about Eastern world. That basically has been reduced to the only that Eastern nation culture. They couldn't identify various fault lines between either between China, Japan, or South Korean and other South Asian countries. So then here he remarkably, Kaushik Kumar brought the differences, nuances that is South Korea presenting towards the world, and we know that we have been very much influenced by Korean soft power. Like Korean movies are very famous in India, and Koreans and and the vibrant Koreans Buddhist heritage is also very much linked to India. So these are things that we need to cherish, and we need to engage it more, right? So and then we have because who rightly aptly stated about India's India's diplomacy towards South Korea in terms of achieving in terms of soft power. So then here, because has identified that various themes like yoga and educational diplomacy. So through where the India is connecting to South Korea. So here, here we have the very excellent discussions, but we still have like we could bring it into the focus upon the Korea's democracy and its effect on other fellow countries like with India. And similarly, we could look upon that as we are in the social media, as we are in like digital era. Then how is the digital era equally transfusing the not only about good information, but also about some negativity, like as we know that we have like authoritarian countries like China. So their approaches toward the culture and our approaches toward culture, how do we look upon that, means in cyber arena and then other factors. So those are important also equally. But again, looking into this very soft power uh, software power dimension of Korea, very excellent, and we look forward to know much more about through our two presenters. I'm handling it to Mr. Amardeep. Hello, Amardeep.
Thank you, Bhupender ji, for your
Thank you.
discussions. So the next discussion is Amardeep Kumar, who is going to discuss about our another two presenters. So Amardeep Kumar, are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Am
So
I
over to you,
audible, sir?
Amardeep Kumar.
Yeah, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Bhupendra Kumar has discussed two presenters, and he gave his own insights about what is soft power, and he discussed some theoretical perspective about soft power. So I'll also discussing about a bit about soft power. What is soft power? Basically, soft power is all about attraction, whereas hard power basically defines coercion. And whereas physically, hard power basically kind of physically involvement of any country or any international institutions and so on. Whereas soft power basically attracts or impacts on the mind of the people. So it's a kind of gradual process. So basically, Deepak has discussed about how India has contributed in the peace process of Korean Peninsula and during the war. So basically, his topic of the presentation was India's contribution in the peace process on Korean Peninsula. So basically, in first part, he discussed about India's relation with two Korean Peninsulan countries. The first was India's relation with South Korea, and second was India's relation with North Korea. So when it was started, so basically India's engagement in the region started since after, it can be said that after India's independence, India involved or engaged in the region, and later on, like trust building process, paying visits of paying visits of both countries. It can be said that the exchange of visits of leader of the both countries, and later on it turned into deepening of economic and other cultural activities in the region. So like, and the second part was like in the like in 1960 in India and South Korea's relation was, can we say that the first India first established its consular relations with Korea in 1960 with South Korea in 1961. Then India established its full diplomatic relations in 1973, which further deepened its economic engagement and further comprehensive dialogues later on. Like India, when 1992 under Narasimha Rao government, India's Lucist policy was like comprehensive policy in the region. Later on, when Modi government came to power in 2015, so India, like Modi, further extended its look. It is really appreciated by both countries that how India will act. Basically, India that Deepak has discussed that how in 1960 Deepak also discussed that how India established its relation with North Korea in like 1976. India first cultural agreement took place between both these countries. Then in 1980s high level visits, and in 1950, like in 1950 Kiran Rijiju also said that Korean Peninsula is very important, and especially North Korea. So he hoped that India will establish its relation and it will deepen its relation, so that both cultural activities and other activities will deepen its bilateral relations. Like General VK Singh, Deepak also mentioned that how Indian military general VK Singh visited North Korea and talked about extensive engagement with Korean Peninsulan countries. So basically, Deepak also talked about why India need peace, because India's its historical like that. Why India need peace in the region, because peace in the region will also benefit India's policy in the region, because India is engaged in many several policy diplomatic relations in the region, like countering China, India's involvement, active involvement in the region, like in the region, debates in the South China Sea debates, South China Sea policy, India's South China Sea policy to counter Chinese hegemonic expansion in the region. So there are many other issues, and India, like how India tried to engage in the region. Like India supported the President Moon's peace policy to overture the North Korea, and many other things that Deepak had extensively discussed. And second paper that was discussed by Dr. Ram Parvez, Indian diaspora in South Korea, a soft power diplomacy. Like Ram Parvez discussed how Indian diplomacy, soft power diplomacy evolved in the course of the history from ancient to modern period. Like ancient period, he discussed about how from Kautilya to Gandhi to Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, uh, discussed about and gave the concept of soft power, like how Nehru put his idea about pan Asianism. Like recently, it's in the talk about the Asian values, which South Korea also appreciate that what is Asian value, and we should promote these Asian values to counter Western notion of soft power or Western hegemonic concept, that how Western country has been influencing the other parts of the world. So Nehru's idea is much more relevant in the 20th century that Nehru gave in the 1950s. What is Pan-Arabism? So Ram Parvesh Shah rightly put it out that we should also promote such kind of ideas that promote Asian values. And he also talked about what Tagore and Gandhi's concept of non-violence. Another aspect, he talked about Buddhism, which is widely spread, especially in the East countries, like East Asian countries, and South Korea and not South Korea and Korea. You can say Korean Peninsula is not exception of this. that Buddhism has impacted a lot of like all sphere of life of Korean peoples. So Ram Parvesh in second part discussed about Indian diaspora, like how Indian diaspora is affecting the other parts of the world. And according to, he gave also the report of about Indian diaspora situation in the world. It is one of the largest diaspora in the world, and South Korea is also hosting a large number of Indian diaspora. So it is especially it is affecting and benefiting India as well as South Korea also. So Ram Parvesh extensively talked about Modi's three element of soft power. The first one was Buddhism, second was diaspora, third was Indian yoga philosophy. You know that Indian yoga philosophy, which UN has recognized that it is a kind of international yoga day, is being celebrated because of its power of Indian diaspora. But in both, but I'd like to say that from my perspective, the both paper presented a different kind of vision, but it lacks somewhere the theoretical perspective. Basically, both talked about like from the perspective of South Western scholars, but there was some kind of Indian notion or South Korean, and it can be said that Asian perspective, like a prominent scholar of JNU, like B.S. Chimney. He's a prominent scholar in terms of India international theory. He talks about 12 approach, that is third world approach. So we should evolve our own approach, defining in terms of what is soft power. So it will be very comprehensive. What is soft power from the perspective of our Asian culture. Basically, that Ram Parvesh talked about Pan-Asianism. So we should also focus on some kind of our own perspective, so that we can counter Western perspective of soft power. So I'd conclude, and I'd like to say congratulations all of presenters. Now I'm handing over to Professor Santosh Kumar Ranjan. Thank you, sir.
Sir, and Bhupendra
Yeah.
sir for your discussions. So, okay. So, presenters have any point to say more on the after the discussions? Any point you want to add after the discussions point? If you want to add, then please, presenters.
Actually, I want to make. Actually, in my presentation, I have not given as much as data. I have, due to lack of time, I have made, whatever data I have, within. I have collected within a short period of time. I have already mentioned the thing. But another point I would like to add in my presentation, actually. According to official of Indian mission in South Korea, over 1,000 engineers and software professionals, have recently come to the South Korea, working for large conglomerates such as LG, Hyundai, and Samsung, which today become household name in India. So actually, we can say that how South Korean company have Korean company have a great impact on Indian society. Actually, if you visit any household of India, you can see the LG company is there. I mean Hyundai company is there. Samsung company. Actually, I forgot this. Basically, three major company of South Korea. To add this. Thank you, sir.
So thank you, Ram Pravesh. Any other presenters who want to add something? So, okay. So as we heard today about the South Korea's growing soft power, basically in relation with India's soft power diplomacy. So as the Indians and Koreans and our native countries, Myanmar and Cambodia, are participants here. So most of maybe aware about the India-Korea deep relationship since the past. It's the Buddhist linkage all over the Asia and the world. And after that, it's colonial period. And then after that, at the presenters discuss about during the Korean War, and after that the state making process, how the India involved and how the India made their roles. And after that, it's also the Korean economic development process, India's role, and the current scenario also discuss about the Indian diaspora and the same way the Korean diaspora. And so and also it's also important to say that like last year it was the 100 years of the Korean independence movement, and this year and it's marked at the 70 years of the Korean War. As and Indian government also praised gave the hero of the Korean War, the Indian unit head Ranganathan. So through this all presentation, we can see how the India-Korea relations rooted deeply, and from the historical perspective and the past perspective and the ongoing the relationship. So and through this we can see the further perspective of the India-Korea relations. So as we are having participants from different countries, so maybe it will be helpful for the policymaker to understand more closely to India-Korea relations, and vice versa towards how they can do more. So I would like to open the floor for question. If anyone have questions or any point, any comments, feel free to raise your hand and ask your question. You can ask by the video chat, or you can maybe type your questions in the chat box on the Zoom link here. So if there is no question, so with the permissions of our organizer, is that okay? Or we can? No one have any question? Should I ask the question then? So I will ask question to our presenters, maybe can answer very simply that which one is the India soft power is the most powerful to play a role between India, Korea, as the presenter discuss about the cultural diplomacy and political international like relation diplomacy. So from your opinion, anyone can say anything on it, like according to you, which one is the most powerful?
Diaspora is an effective instrument.
Okay, Vikasji.
Diaspora is one of the most effective instrument of India's soft power diplomacy to engage with South Korea, because Modi government has started Korean scholarship, South Korean students to pursue advanced Buddhist study in India and in South Korea. Therefore, I think diaspora is one of the best instrument of soft power diplomacy for India to engage with South Korea.
Yes, as I think Ram Parvesh also discussed, he raised the point that United Nations data he showed, and it showed that how the Indian diaspora is influential globally and how they are promoting the Indian culture, and the same way they are also bringing from their country's culture to our mother country India.
Yeah.
So anyone want to add? If no, any other questions, no any other point, any comments?
I would like to add in diaspora, the Modi administration has continued to practice of previous in organizing the annual Pravasi Bharatiya Divas.
Okay.
This is very effective to engage with the South Korea and South Korean diaspora, Indian diaspora in South Korea, to recognize their contribute to India's growth and development.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Vikasji. And so we can see also Korean diaspora spreading in India, because all of you are living in Delhi, so you seeing the growing population of the South Koreans basically in India, especially in the Jawaharlal Nehru University. You may have seen how the Korean student number is increasing. Earlier it was, I think, Nepal or Bangladesh student were the highest number, and nowadays we are having I think the highest or the second highest number from the foreign student from the South Korea. So I think the soft power, under the soft power, it's working well, and it will improve more. And in that way, the Indian student or Indians will increase in South Korea, as well as South Korean will like a student or the companies, and the more entrepreneurs will maybe invest and interest in Korea, in India. So by this way, I would like to conclude and end of the session. So I would like to give my heartful thanks to the organizing committee. Especially, I would like to thank on the behalf of our Indian team to our president, Professor Sin Khangwan, and our here the chair of like the president of this seminar, and all the the organizing committee member who organized this international webinar in this hard time, especially in the corona pandemic. And more importantly, I would like to thank the students and all other staff who worked behind the screen. We are on the screen, but behind the screen, they works a lot, and more than, I think, 1 month they prepared for this conference. And without them, we were not able to meet like this way, and this webinar was not able to success. So I'd like to thank, and I would like to congratulate the president of Komira, Professor Khang Sing-wan. And I would like to thank all the participants who stay with us until this time, and especially with the different time zone. So thank you, all of you, and please stay healthy during this pandemic time, and please be positive. Thank you, everyone. So I would like to end this session 5V with this way. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.